and for helping us with that task, we have Eric Peterson from Cloud Zero. How are you, Eric?
I'm doing very well. Nice to see you, Victor.
Thanks for being here today. I think almost no presentation needed for anyone in FinOps, but we'll talk about your background later on with more stuff. And of course, I have my co-host here, Damian. Damian, how are you doing?
Doing great. Thank you, Victor. Hi, Eric. Thank you for being here.
Nice to see you. Yeah. Hi, Damien.
So I'm going to start with maybe a tough question, but it's going to be, I think, very actionable for our listener, which is like, if you have to pick now one single action to focus to, make your AI workloads more efficient, what it would be?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. So it's a great place to start if we want to make it more efficient. I think the first, and this might sound just a little bit crazy, is to actually ask yourself, should I even be doing this in the first place? Um, it is so easy to get started doing something and just start tinkering with something and have actually lost the thread, lost the reason for why we started to do this in the first place. And we end up with things that cost a lot of money, but without a lot of worth
Mhm.
to the business. It's the same thing as leave. I think it's the AI equivalent of leaving a bunch of EC2 projects running over the weekend and forgetting about it, right? And this is happening a lot in AI. We see a lot of people playing with the technology, not understanding it, not really knowing what they're doing. A lot of experiments. I call these kind of like the zombie AI apocalypse, right? Because we've got all these like half-baked ideas busy costing money and nobody's really quite sure why it's there.
I think I totally agree. That's a very good answer. I think the question wasn't easy, but yeah, to be honest, being understanding why everything is made in the first place and understanding if the AI is going to bring you more value or less than doing it, I don't know, with your own or with compute workload is one of the best decision that you can make. So everything is I think it's good for people to first start thinking about, okay, do I need this? Start making the mistake as early as possible so you can always fix it. And diving it into a little more deep. So we have now decided, okay, there is some issues with AI workloads, right? So what do you think, or what have you detected in your customers that are early warning signs or early signs that the AI spending is going south, that is not going to, it's growing too much, it's not going in the right direction?
Yeah. So, kind of coming off of the value conversation, then we kind of start to get into some of the technology. And a lot of this is exacerbated by the fact that the technology is moving so fast. Quite literally right now, everybody is trying to make heads or tails of GPT-5 and how that, just kind of flew onto the space. Everyone was super excited about it. Now there's kind of a backlash. People are wondering, well, was this a step forward? Yesterday, I found it super frustrating actually, and I just moved back to the legacy mode. So I was like kind of blown away that it just flat out wasn't working. And this is the kind of first thing as you start to build solutions, you start to create things. You have to have started with a readiness for change, because every month it seems like there's going to be a new model that you might want to try to experiment with. You might want to have to upgrade to something new. Maybe you're using LiteLLM as a proxy to kind of control and route connections. I just read a really interesting post in Reddit about LangChain and how all the ways that people are recommending to use it, or LangChain is recommended to use, are actually not used by the majority of organizations. In fact, are very inefficient and very difficult to troubleshoot and debug. And so the technology is moving super fast, and we don't always build with the idea that we're going to be changing things constantly.
Mhm.
And so this creates another avenue for cost, because you get these mismatches between the technology, particularly in some of these agentic systems. You have systems that start to communicate with themselves and they get lost in the conversation, and you don't really have visibility into that. And I've seen people upgrade the LLMs and start getting different performance results out of that. And then they go, why is it taking so long? When they finally get into the details, they realize these multiple agents have just been talking to themselves, getting confused, and every single one of those conversations is money spent, right? So having an idea of how you're going to A/B test things, how you're going to constantly update this stuff, sometimes the answer is don't touch anything. It's working, right? But somebody's going to come to you and go, "Oh, the new GPT
Yeah.
2000 has come out," right? Does that make it better or worse? You've got to build in for change from the start.
That's a good observation. I think like if anyone has played either for like for cloud or for automation or any kind of tool for AI, one of the main problem is the model switch and being able to the workload doesn't take like one day to just refactor the model name in all places that you have, and that model
Hmm.
dependency is one of the trickiest thing and also one of the most important thing because swapping the model influence your cost directly. It's not the same to have a cloud sonnet for your task than having I don't know a
Yeah.
llama embedded that is super cheap that you can have wherever. So that's probably one of the things that you need to take into account. And as mentioned, model for change because this is going to be changing every month as we have seen, and sometimes for good, sometimes for not that good results. So you need to be able to be prepared for testing.
Yeah.
I don't know, Damien, if you have any thoughts or any challenges or any issues that you have seen in orgs that could be tricky for them.
Well, I think that what I've seen, at least, people still don't know how to, how to deal with the AI. I don't think they have enough education about how to implement it, how to work with it, and that, of course, has a direct impact on the price, right? Because people start doing things, trying to do stuff, and like even Eric was saying, sometimes they don't plan it, they didn't plan, they start to use it, start playing around, and the cost rise. So I think that. Like always, the thing is very good to start with, education, at least, from not from developing a tool perspective, but when you're implementing AI in organizations, like how do you what you can do it. Try to limit also, the the cost that you do it and how you do it. That's also always a good idea. I think from our side, from as FinOps practitioners, there's a good also option. So I think again, it's something that from one side, we see that it's created a huge jump, right, from what it was and what it's AI today. But I think there still has well, obviously always a place to grow. But I think it's like we're not getting back what we are expecting. So again, that also
Mm.
has some impact on the on the cost as well, because people keep trying to use it and keep trying to communicate with it, and not knowing how to create a good question on how to use it correctly, then the impact is on the cost is very huge. So this is what I've
Yeah.
seen so far.
Yeah. Yeah. At the end of the day, we're still building systems, we're still creating things. We at the heart of all this is the engineering organizations. Even if these folks, the engineers, the developers who are building these systems are becoming increasingly, I'll say, AI augmented,
Mm-hmm.
right? I shared with, we brought all of Cloud Zero together every year, and we were talking internally about how we also embrace AI technologies to improve our output and the work that we're doing. And there's a lot of fear that AI might be coming for for some of us, right? It's coming for our jobs, right? And I said, today we're not entirely sure. Okay, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't. We don't exactly know right now. But I will tell you, somebody using AI is probably coming for your job, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like the days before a calculator when we sat down and did some math, and it's like, oh, well, I can do it all by hand on paper, right? Yeah, but I can do it with a calculator 10, 100 times faster. Why are you showing up with an abacus, right? We have to embrace these tools. And so I encourage everyone I speak to, I encourage my whole company to think about this differently. And I said, stop apologizing for AI. We've all been watching presentations or folks up there talking about this and going, okay, well, today I'd like to present to you on this topic. Oh, and by the way, AI generated my images and AI did this and AI did that. I'm like, do you ever hear a mathematician sitting down and going, just by the way, I used a calculator to do my paper, right? Nobody says I used a calculator, that to produce my, PhD thesis. No, you assume that they use tools. And we're in this kind of interesting space right now between the point in time where we're almost like apologizing and embarrassed that we use these tools to a place where you're just not going to be considered serious in your work if you're not using these tools. And that's probably one of the most interesting, people, and of course, there's all these other papers, people talking about, oh, well, our brains are atrophying, we're losing our edge. This is exactly what I heard, decades ago when people are saying, oh, you can't bring a calculator into the classroom because you're losing your edge, right? I know nobody in business who does math by hand,
Yeah.
right? And this is the same thing that's going to be in a couple of years' time. We're going to know nobody in business that does software engineering by hand. Everyone will have an AI agentic coding experience. The role of the software engineer is going to dramatically, permanently change, right? And I think this is another kind of area that ties in very specifically with FinOps as well, because I've said this very clear for a very long time. Every engineering decision is a buying decision. The software engineer is the one making the buying decisions. Now that software engineer is augmented by AI, AI is going to have a very symbiotic relationship with a software engineer. So that buying decision is now an AI decision as well. And this debate that is just starting to bubble to the surface is, are we ready to give AI the credit card? Right? Are we ready to let it go do the purchase? Right? I've been playing around with some of these these agentic systems that can go out and use browsers and click
Mhm.
around. And the other day I was using it to plan a trip, and I got it all the way to the point where it could have entered the credit card and purchased the flight for me. But I realized I'm not quite ready to trust AI with my credit card yet. And that's the same question that's the flip side of this, right? We're building AI systems, they're moving very fast, they're becoming expensive. I think it's interesting, from that side of the coin to think about the costs and how we to think about that. But then there's this other side that we're not talking about, which is AI is now going to be making the buying decisions as it makes some of these architecture decisions. And does it have the right guardrails? Does it have the right controls? Do we have the right oversight? If it's going to augment my FinOps experience, how am I going to, build trust in that process or have the ability to kind of roll back? We're going to see a lot more fun blog posts about people saying, "Oh, I connected AI to my environment and it deleted my production database," or something like that. Like there's gonna be a couple more stories like that. But at some point, we're gonna have to answer both sides of this equation. What does it cost? And really that cost question is not really about cost, it's about value. Am I getting a return on this investment? I'm using this technology because it sounded really cool, but did it actually deliver value? And then there's we're going to use this every day of our lives to build systems. And am I ready to give it the credit card? Am I ready to let it start making buying decisions? And the answer right now, I think, is no. But we want to get there because it will help us move faster. And when I think about the future, particularly for Cloud Zero, like we see our role sitting in between both of those universes, right? Providing the guardrails and providing the inputs so that as systems are getting built, they are being guided towards a better financial outcome for the entire business. And then also guiding the technology and the engineering decisions that are being made so that they're efficient in the value that they deliver. Right? And that's a lot of times a very unit economics conversation around the value that an AI system is building. But we've also got to control the other side, which is how do these things get built in the first place?
Yeah, that's a very good reflection, and I think it's very interesting. And continuing on the topic that you mentioned about the engineers making the buying decision based on your, you had I don't know if one article or a series of articles about the million dollar lines of code that now AI
Yeah.
is making, right? Those changes could be an instance change, an efficiency, a performance change on a lambda
Mm.
could cost you exponentially million dollars of cost. And now those changes are made by the AI, so you need to be very careful on those. So I will leave the link in the description about that articles, because it was one of the first
Yeah.
ones that I read when I was studying, and I think it was very,
Oh, it's so, yeah, so it applies so perfectly. And now, I personally, I set a goal for myself that I want to achieve a level of kind of understanding with the AI coding tools out there this year, so that I can be in a position where I can produce, me personally, a single person, produce 1 million lines of code in 1 month. Now, a lines of code is a horrible
yeah,
metric, okay? It's not something that you measure anyone's, you would never measure your engineering team's success by how many lines of code they're cranking out. You really do need to get back to value. Right now, I just see it as a interesting objective, because if I can get into a position where I have tools that can produce 1 million lines of code, and hopefully now I've got to go figure out the next part of it, which is, was it valuable?
yeah,
That I did. But that's the kind of future, because I'm looking at my entire engineering team, and realizing if I can get them into a mode where we're using these tools really effectively, we're building systems really efficiently, we're delivering great value, I can turn each individual engineer on the team into a team
yeah,
themselves. And that becomes an unstoppable kind of force. We've got to always be thinking about value, and not, how much. I really want to see FinOps, the entire FinOps community, the world, kind of move beyond just thinking about this, some of the infrastructure choices, but how do businesses produce digital value? And is it worth it in the first place? Go beyond how much did it cost to was it worth it?
yeah. I think all
And
relates about that, like being able, as there was some post online, like if the output is valuable, like if it's something that you can hack into, that is really valuable for people, and not only for AI, it's valuable for people, then you are doing something. If it's only valuable and it's going to be, processed by AI, then another AI will pick it, and then there is no one at the end of the chain to be, acquiring value from it, then you are probably wasting, and that's some metric
yeah,
that that you need to talk about. And evolving a bit, because so for people may not know you, but I want you to explain the story. So you have been the founder of Cloud Zero. You have been, a long time in the FinOps ecosystem. So how do you have seen the evolution of FinOps when it faced the AI challenge? So when the AI workloads started to appear, and whenever
mm,
FinOps was starting to say, okay, we need to control this because it's a cost. How have you seen, like, the beginning of the AI workload, FinOps AI for AI? How are you seeing evolving, and especially if you can tell us, like, for example, in Cloud Zero, how you have faced that challenge, because it's, after all, it's a challenge for
yeah.
tools.
Yeah, it is a challenge from lots of different dimensions. There's three different sides to it, actually. At least from our perspective, how we think about it, Cloud Zero, but also what I've seen other organizations do. The first thing I would say is, just like cloud, and I think a lot of people who, you know, it's great when you go to a FinOps. First off, the FinOps community is amazing. You go to a conference, you always encounter people who have been doing this for a while, and the first kind of calibrating conversation you have with somebody when you first meet is like, "How long have you been doing FinOps?" And the most common answer is, "Since before it was called FinOps," right? And so if I go all the way back, we're in this same kind of amazing, wonderful time that we've seen before, which is the cloud is wonderful. It's free. Just go build, go create. Let's just skip through the flowers, and sing out loud. And very interestingly, I think a lot of people need to realize there are people asking questions about cost, but it is not the executives in your company. right now when it comes to AI. There are responsible FinOps minded engineers, FinOps, teams. They're going, it seems like we're spending a lot of money on this. Is that okay? Because they've seen this before. We all experienced it in the early days of cloud. But I'll tell you, I have not run into a business leader yet who has said, hey, folks, this costs too much, right? Slow down. I haven't heard anybody say that yet. And I think that's telling. It's a kind of an interesting
Mhm.
marker in terms of like where we are in the evolution. I see people squeezing the cloud bill to take, to try to reduce the cost of that and make that more efficient, and then take that money and immediately spend it on AI.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're removing this spend from the business. No, it's driving growth. They are driving efficiency over here so that they can drive growth in AI on the other side. And that is happening everywhere. I've talked to heads of engineering and teams building a really amazing. I guarantee you, there are products. I've talked to heads of engineering for companies that are using products that we are all using every single day. I
Hmm.
promise you. And they have incorporated AI into some of these tools. And I was like, oh, that's amazing. How are you tracking that? Oh, well, we built out a unit economics dashboard in Cloud Zero to track the cost per activity, or sometimes people are looking at cost per prompt or their
Hmm.
cost per whatever it is this thing does. I often tell people Cloud Zero exists to help companies understand what does it cost to do the thing that it is that we do, right? That's so much more valuable than I spent $1 million in EC2 or $1 million on ChatGPT. It's like, well, what did it cost to do the thing that we do, right? And as we add these new AI features, our customers are trying to track that from a unit economics perspective. And I go, oh, that's fantastic. Well, how's it going? And they go, well, it's amazing. It's the fastest growing, most widely adopted feature of our company ever. And I'm like, that's amazing. And then they go, yeah. And I go, well, what do you mean? Yeah. Like, you don't sound so excited. And like, it's also the least profitable currently. And I'm like, wow, okay. That sounds like a problem. And they're like, yeah, I'm a little worried about it. I mean, the costs are they seem to be kind of coming down. And then a new model comes out and then it's more expensive and then something changes. So we're not quite sure. And I've presented this to my management, but they've told me there's no way we're turning this off,
Yeah.
because it is the fastest growing, most exciting, thing that they've done in a long time. And so at some point, that's a recipe for, there's going to be a correction. There's going to be something
Hmm.
that will have to happen, but that's not happening right now. And I think a lot of people are thinking the same way. I forget, it was a few years ago. Sam Altman was asked at a conference, how is OpenAI going to turn a profit, right?
Hmm.
And he said, I honestly don't. I'm going to paraphrase. I'm going to try to remember what he said, but he said something to the effect of, I honestly don't know how we're going to turn a profit. We haven't really figured that out yet. But I do know that I'm building the system that will one day tell me how, and then I'll just go do it. Once the system tells me how, AGI is going to, once AGI arrives and OpenAI has produced the model that is actually smart enough, he knows, at least his bet is that the system he's building is going to then one day inform him how
Yeah.
to go about it. And I think a lot of people are kind of thinking about it the same way right now. That at some point this system will stabilize, and then we'll figure out how it actually generates a profit. And I think we know in life, like, that, hope is not a strategy,
Yeah.
right? So um so anyway, so there is this like relentless drive, and I love it because I think you should use cost not as a way to kind of reduce, you use cost as a living, breathing metric that drives business decisions, that drives your kind of how you rationalize and think about the flow of value in your organization, and you should use that to um, to really drive innovation.
Hmm.
You know, if you're just doing cost cutting for cost cutting's sake, I get it, but
Yeah.
there's something more powerful when you use the numbers to drive innovation. You know, you can make something more efficient, and that drives innovation. There's a whole conversation that blew up, 6 months ago. Everybody was talking about Jevons paradox. I'm still talking about Jevons paradox, which is, the more efficient you make something, the more you drive consumption, and so that is right at the center of like what it I think means, like the pinnacle of like achieving kind of FinOps greatness
Yeah.
is just like we have we have driven innovation that has made something more efficient, which has then driven growth for my company, and who's at the center of it? It's the FinOps team,
Yeah.
right?
That's
So back, so to your question, like what are the kind of like key elements here? We've got to be thinking about the efficiency and the value stream. We have to be in a position where we at least are instrumenting these things and understanding what they are, because at some point the business is going to ask the question, okay, are we able to really turn a profit on this?
mhm.
Because sooner or later it doesn't go well for you if you can't do that. It doesn't matter necessarily where your margins are. There's a very active conversation in the VC community if like the software SaaS world needs to rethink its margin target.
Mhm.
For most people, for a long time, it's been like, well, we want to hit an 80%
Yeah.
margin. A16Z wrote a blog post years ago about how they think maybe AI systems is more like a 60% margin. Then now people are talking about how SaaS is going to be completely disrupted by this. So maybe people need to be targeting like a more like a services margin, like
Mhm.
30%. And then you have companies or other ways of thinking that go all the way back to where Jeff Bezos was years ago when he was starting Amazon, where he said, your margin, my opportunity, where he basically said, I just want to run the business exactly on the line and invest everything back in and just focus everything on growth. And again, who's going to be at the center of that conversation in a world where value is delivered digitally? It's the FinOps team. There's no better time to be a FinOps person than now, right now,
Yeah.
right? Um, but the FinOps person, of course, they're straddling these two worlds. There's the business on one side, there's the engineering team on the other side. And if they're not every day getting up and thinking about how they link these two worlds together, they're doing their business a disservice. And you've really got to start there. Then you can get into some of the more specific things, like tactically. All right, what am I going to really do? Like, because there is this tactical side of the equation we haven't really talked about yet, which is, yeah, I'm going to turn off stuff that's not running. I'm going to right size this. I'm going to, optimize that. But honestly, you need to start with these like value conversations
Mhm.
first, particularly when we're operating in a time where the business isn't asking for cost savings; they're asking for growth.
Yeah, that's totally true. And I think you set it up very very well for my follow-up question, which is like, business, it's all about metrics, it's all about measuring things, it's all about controlling stuff. So one of the starting ways to measure that is with KPIs slash, unit economics, all that stuff. So, for the AI workloads, for people that, or for companies that are spending a lot on AI, which AI metrics or which AI KPIs do you think a
Mm.
FinOps team or an engineering team should be start tracking, as soon as they can? What do you think make, quick wins more difference? What have you seen in
Yeah.
your experience?
So in general, if I see two different paths to to trying to understand your unit costs. And neither one is wrong, but they're fundamentally different. And I often see people talking about them interchangeably, but
Mm-hmm.
they are fundamentally different. One is what I would call infrastructure unit cost. Unit cost from an infrastructure perspective. These are the traditional things like cost per vCPU or cost per megabyte or cost per transaction. And transaction starts to bridge the gap into
Mm-hmm.
business, but like these infrastructure unit costs are a one way, and I think it's the easiest way to get started when you think about trying to get into a mode where you're tracking unit costs. And there's nothing wrong with it. And so the infrastructure unit costs for the AI are cost per token, cost per prompt, cost per inference. These things that are very much linked to the consumption of resources that are within an AI system, right? And it could be a single LM that you're interfacing with. It can be an agentic system, so in which case you might be wanting to track total costs in this. You may need to you need to kind of go beyond that and start applying attributes to that. So, what's my cost for a cached response versus a non-cached response? Am I caching at all? Like, which is one of the optimizations you should be asking. Um, but these like very specific infrastructure related kind of components, and that's a good place to start. Because it's easy. You don't have to go have a complicated conversation with the business and try to really understand the value yet. But you should be careful with those metrics because they're not yet directly
Mm-hmm.
connected to value,
Yep.
right? You may go optimize something that doesn't actually deliver the outcome that you're looking for. Um, and even worse, you may go optimize something like, so if you start tracking your cost per token and you go, wow, how do I get my cost per token down? And then you start forcing changes or you start squeezing things, and then you completely forget that the product that's being delivered to market is getting worse and
Yep.
worse, right? And you can declare victory going, oh, we got our cost per token down to, a penny, and meanwhile nobody's using your product anymore because they're like, this thing hallucinates, has no accuracy, the value has disappeared, right? And so I think that's the danger if you just pursue infrastructure unit costs. But it's a fine place to start
Mm-hmm.
because it helps start opening your mind to like how the costs are flowing in your organization. Very quickly though, you need to move from that to a place of value. All right, what is it that we do? If I have an agentic system that answers questions for my support team, now I actually have to go beyond just, what's the cost per that, but let me get into like a cost per conversation, but I have to bring some other areas of value into this. Like, what is the purpose of a chatbot on a support site? It's certainly there to help somebody, but the real purpose, and this is where it gets a little uncomfortable when we start talking about jobs, is the real purpose for a chatbot on a website, for a support site, is to deflect support calls going to real
Mm-hmm.
humans, right? So that we can get more value out of the teams that we have. And beyond that, maybe I don't actually need the same size of team anymore. That's going to take people's jobs. It's true, and it's happening. That kind of thing is actually happening. But when we think about the value, that is part of the value stream. If I put a chatbot on my site and it starts answering support calls for people and it deflects 20% of my support calls from ever having to engage with a human being, that's a 20%, potentially, like a 20% cost savings realized on the headcount side or the human cost side. And you know, setting aside the, kind of like the social
Yep.
economic ramifications of that is part of the value conversation. That is part of the unit economic conversation. It's almost like we start in a hole with these systems costing more money than they seem to be worth. But then when we bring in these outside metrics of how they're changing the operation of my business, or how they're changing the entire process, now the value maybe is way bigger than we actually imagine. And so you have to start thinking about that. And this gets back to value. It gets back to the first thing I said, which is why are we building this thing in the first place? What's the purpose of this? And that is something I don't see enough FinOps people. I know they want to have this conversation, but they kind of get lost in the weeds sometimes. I don't see enough FinOps people sitting down with the business and saying, well, what is it that we do here? And what is it that we really think, we should be, what revenue should we be generating? How profitable should this thing be? What is the purpose? Um, and so we've got to move from that. Right now, most people though are trying to understand cost per token, and it's interesting, but it's not going to get us to the place that we need to be.
That's true. I think the connecting it to the business and evolving from the infrastructure cost, which I think is the basics of controlling, and then but not taking. I think solely, as you mentioned, taking action from the infrastructure cost could be something that is tricky. Even though if you are optimizing your cost especially for performance like consumption. Like if your CPUs are used at 20% and now you are moving into 70%, then that's you are doing something. But then moving to the next step you need to do is related to business metrics, because that's what you're going to report. That is going to be more meaningful, I think, for leadership, and it will
Mm.
also probably get you some buy-in, like your initiatives
Oh yeah,
are make more sense, not because you are talking about cost per vCPU, but rather cost per transaction, or cost per order, or cost per the application is more efficient. Because sometimes and especially I think I related from me coming from the engineering side, we focus a lot into the technical details, like we
hmm,
thought about the performance, the CPUs, the memory, but after all, what you are doing a business thing, so you need to think about, okay, what's my business doing. Is it
yeah,
Amazon, so it's cost per order, how many orders are we processing per minute, or is it, I don't know, an airline company, and you are controlling everything, and you're optimizing your seats. So you need to understand, like, what your specific product in your company is doing. And from there, if you just think and plan it ahead and you write it down in a piece of paper, then you probably say, okay, this is valuable, this is not. Cost per CPU, maybe you need a lot, maybe you don't need it because you are, I don't know, you are a critical workload. I was talking with the other day
yeah,
with a company that is in a critical sector. They make like critical availability things. So they like the FinOps team, they told me, like, we don't care that much about cost. What is more important is the availability. Like, it can fail. Like, I need to fulfill. This is my contract. This
yeah,
is what I get paid for. Cost, unless it's killing my margin and making my business unprofitable, I don't care. Like, it needs to be
yeah.
available.
Well, and this is where I've heard that so many times, and I think like, yeah, that's exactly. But I also see it as this is an opportunity for FinOps professionals to really up level their worth to
Mm-hmm.
the organization, because on one hand, you could say, yeah, look, this is a mission critical thing. It has to be up and running all the time, 24/7. We don't care about cost. But that's the wrong way to say it. What they really need to be saying is the value that we deliver to the business, to the value that we deliver to our customers, is that this system is rock solid. It's up all the time. It's available. People can trust us. That is enormous value. And because of that value, we're able to charge a premium. We're able to deliver a premium product to the market that commands a premium price, right? And that's great because now they're delivering value. They've connected all the investment, the cost in building this 24/7 up all the time thing with a premium price, which in return delivers a premium margin, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you connect the dots between these things. And it's because it's not that people don't care about cost, it's that they're simply saying the value that we're delivering is this. And if we don't talk about the value enough, through the whole chain, then we end up thinking that we don't care about cost. When the reality is that's not at all what you're saying. You're saying, no, 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 we we care about this value. And then the business needs to step in and be like, oh, wow, you're right. We are delivering this value, and that value comes at a cost. So, but we now have a better mechanism to talk about it so we can command a premium price for that value, right? And I see it often when we go in and start working with a customer for the first time and they're saying, yeah, I really want to get to the unit economics of this. And we're chasing down certain metrics. And it could be an agentic system or an AI, chatbot or anything. And we start looking at the metrics and they kind of realize, well, wait a second, these things aren't quite lining up. Like the things that we want to make more efficient are actually going to reduce the value of the business. And you see this impedance
Mm-hmm.
mismatch. And you realize that actually for maybe many years, the things that the team was doing to try to make their system more cost effective and more efficient was actually removing value from the business. And instead of trying to make those things more efficient, what they should have been working on is up leveling this so the business understands the value that they have, so the business can be better at expressing that value so they can command that premium price. And that is such a huge opportunity for the FinOps practitioner to be so much more valuable themselves. Again, this value, this word value,
Yeah.
right? It's it's so important. And then at the end, because at the end of that conversation or that equation is this very important, I think, future for this whole industry, which is to stop thinking about how much should I spend and put all of our focus on, is this worth it?
Yeah.
Is this worth
I
it?
think that's a good a good title for the episode. Like, is it worth it? I think it's a thing, a question that we should think before we do anything in business,
Mm.
and definitely is it's a good summary of what we talked about.
I also I think that you both talk a lot. You did very well about mentioning, the how the practitioner starts, with the basics all the times, and the quick wins, and you go to the infrastructure, and then you have like the business value that, of course, that I hope that we hear more and more and keeps growing, like you, Eric, were saying. But there is another thing that I don't know where you, Eric, were talking about also in two or three questions already, that about efficiency, but the efficiency
Mm.
also, I think it's like I would like to see KPIs more about how to measure efficiency, not only from the business perspective, but also internal, because AI is being used on a day to day. So and we touch base as well. The ones they're not going to be using AI, they're going to lose. We're going to lose the job to that first, not to the AI. So I guess that we need to see how we measure that as well, in a lot of like sense, not only from, okay, I have this. Right now we're like checking licenses, if people are using it, right? How to, but now we need
Yeah.
to have like another layer that, okay, you're using AI, how more efficient are you on that, right? It's like it brings this new like kind of level that will be interesting to see how it develops. You you brought up,
No, no, no.
right?
Yeah.
It's a very interesting topic, like measuring internally, as a lot of companies develop their internal tools to measure efficiency. I think now AI could be like another thing to measure to improve the predictability and the productivity of the company employees and stuff. It's a very good point.
Hmm.
And relating these two last topics that we mentioned is, Eric, if for a finance practitioner that wants to become more valuable for their company, what do you think are like top two, three actions or things that they should do to become more valuable nowadays and for the future? Like, what they should focus on from your perspective?
Yeah. So and I'll answer your question, kind of specifically, in this AI
Mm-hmm.
era. First and foremost, it's use the calculator and do not apologize for using the calculator. Use the tools. You've got to make this part of your daily, kind of daily work stream, because you will be more efficient. It will help you find different patterns, and it'll change how you work. And this, that you could probably apply that to any profession, but I think it's just as it's super important to folks in this role, and stop apologizing for it. You will become way more efficient. And the best way I know to do this, practically, I call it the 1 hour challenge, the 1 hour AI challenge, which is take an hour out of your day and just do everything during that hour using a set of AI tools. It doesn't have to be just one, it can be just one, but just take 1 hour, do the 1 hour AI challenge, and it will do a couple things to your mind. One, you'll discover there are things that you didn't even think were possible. Two, it'll change some of these patterns, because the hardest part of this AI revolution, we're standing on the edge of a logarithmic curve that's going straight up, and human beings are horrible at understanding logarithmic change. And so, but the very reality is, like, we're going to look back on this and they're like, well, so when did it all go down with AI and changing everything in the world? Well, it was really slowly at first, and then all at once. And that's what it's going to feel like to all of us. So we've got to do this. And I've challenged everyone in my company to do this, and I've seen amazing results. Take the 1 hour AI challenge and just do everything. You write an email, I'm going to let AI do it. I'm going to write some code, let AI do it. I'm going to answer a question, figure out what to do some research, let AI do it just for an hour. And it'll change everything. Out of that, it'll give you a newfound kind of appreciation of how these tools work and don't work, because it will be an amazing experience. It'll be a frustrating experience. It'll be interesting. You've got to then do this AI challenge you've got to do it regularly, because the technology is changing. A lot of engineering friends of mine earlier in the year, back in, January and February, were like, "Ah, gosh, yeah, I did this thing, and the thing barely generated the code that I needed." Now they're like, "Yeah, I can't live without it. It's generating the code that I need." You're going to get an appreciation for how fast this stuff is moving. You're going to start being able to observe that logarithmic curve that we're standing on. That's super important for setting our perspective for what comes next, in terms of, like, now as a FinOps practitioner, how am I going to apply that knowledge that I'm going to get out of that? Because change has to happen here within ourselves before we're going to go change the rest of the business. And then we have to get into like the real tactical things, like, okay, great, I've got my teams, they're off racing to build these things. What can I provide the most value to the business now that I'm starting to understand these tools better to help people build correctly? Get an arm, the second thing I would tell folks to do is go get your arms around all the experiments. They're all over the place. And understand that each one of these experiments, these AI experiments that are happening in your business, are icebergs. There's a little piece floating above the surface. You might see an indicator in your bell. Oh, somebody's spending some money on Vertex or Bedrock, and there's a little bit of, like, AI spend over here, and it's like $1,000 or $500. It doesn't seem that. No, this is an iceberg, and under the surface is an enormous amount of data. I saw one organization whose S3 costs exploded because their data science team was like, well, where's the data that we need to process through the system? Oh, it's in Switzerland. Okay, so let's just move all that data from Switzerland over to US West, and they paid this massive, like, data transfer cost. And then the data science team was like, oh, the experiment failed. Well, let's just do it again and again and again and again and again, right? And everyone's like, why are our S3 bills going up? And what was it? It was connected to this AI experiment, and it's this iceberg. And so those icebergs are floating everywhere in your organization right now. And so you've got to go find the little thing. And so, just like an anomaly, so one of the things that Cloud Zero did in the early days with our anomaly detection was we would tell people about stuff when it was like a few dollars. And people would go, I don't care about this anomaly, it's a few dollars. We're like, no, 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 no. We've identified it because it's right now a few dollars, but in a couple months, it's going to be thousands of dollars, right? Time is money. Now is the time to go look at this. So go find those little tiny icebergs that are floating in your organization right now, and then figure out what's underneath of it. And Cloudera does really well with the allocation and attribution of spend. We built a whole language to describe this. And so our customers have a really clear picture of those icebergs right now. Then once you've identified those icebergs and you've got your arms around it, you're going to see a bunch of things that that are redundant. You can start turning some of those things off, or you can start being a communicator and get everybody connected. And then the third item, which is sometimes the one that we try to start with first, which is, well, what can I do to make the system more efficient? Oh, they're using this old thing. Let me, reduce the cost per token, or reduce the cost per prompt, or reduce this, or make some of these better technical decisions. Do that last. The technology is constantly changing, but there's a lot to be done there. A lot of times people are like, oh yeah, I never implemented caching or prompt caching. Like, that is from a technical challenge, like, you should definitely be doing that.
Yeah,
You need to be implemented, particularly if you're going to be rolling some sort of system out at scale.
you need it.
And you need to get, that kind of fixed into there. You need to be thinking about how you're evaluating the quality of these things, and make sure the teams have the early warning signs to know when a new model comes out, or they start, experimenting and doing that. They have the ability to do A/B testing, not just from a performance perspective, but cost as part of that A/B test. Those would be the three things: change yourself, understand the icebergs, and then get into some of the tactical things, prompt caching, a better tracking of how agentic workflows are talking, getting into the A/B testing of new technology as it rolls out, but do it in that order.
I think I think that's excellent advice, and thanks for summarizing that way. I think if you do it in that order, you would be much more valuable in the next coming years, especially related to AI. So, Eric, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I think a lot of advice has been dropped today. So thanks, and hopefully the listeners could get a lot of it and can actually apply it to their finance practice. So thanks for coming by and thanks for sharing.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, let's all stop asking what AI costs and start asking, is it worth it?
Yeah, it's a good question to ask. So thanks Damien as well for coming by today.
Thank you very much. It was a lovely episode. Learned a lot. Thank you very much, Eric.
Thanks everybody. Hopefully you liked it and see you in the next episode. Bye bye.